If you're like many developers, you've probably used hex values and RGB and RGBA values to represent colors in almost every web development project that you've ever done. But there's a third color notation that I'm going to talk about in this video, and my entire mission in this video is to convince you that you've been wrong this entire time and it's time for you to change. Let's look at some code and we'll dive into what this color notation is, why it's better than the other ones, and why you should be switching today. As you can see, what I've created here is a color wheel, but instead of creating it with named colors or hex values or RGB values, here I'm using the HSL color notation. Now HSL stands for hue, saturation, and lightness. And the thing that I'm changing throughout each of these gradient color stops is actually the first value, the hue. So the hue is essentially what is along this color wheel. It's actually the color if you were to put them all in a circle and kind of notate them via like 360 degrees. So at the top at 0 degrees, you have red. Then you have green, a full green at 120, and a blue at 240. So as you can see, I'm kind of going through, and every 45 degrees, I've added a color stop, and I've created an entire color wheel using this HSL notation. Now the second and third values, we're going to get into those in 1 second, and I'm going to explain to you how those work, why those work, and by the end of this video, like I said, you are going to want to switch to this color notation. Now, as we go through here, what you're going to notice is that we don't have to say degrees, although we could. We can just put the number as we kind of go around the circle, and that is what notates the hue or the specific color that we're trying to use for our color notation. Now let's look at saturation in the next example. For this example, I created all of the color stops for saturation so that you could see at every single percentage what the saturation looks like. So I have a wrapping div, which I'm just using to flex these boxes inside. And then I just have at each step, we have a saturation value. So it's going anywhere from 0 to 100. And as you can see, I've created some CSS that sets the background color, but in the middle, for the saturation value, we're just using a CSS custom property or a CSS variable to set that. So at step 0, we have 0. At step 10, we have a saturation of 10%, and so on. So saturation goes from gray to the specific color. So as you desaturate a color, as you come down from 100% saturation down to 90, 80, 70, you're just going more towards gray. In fact, any color with a saturation of 0 is just going to be gray, and any color with a saturation of 100% is not going to have any gray in it whatsoever. So you can kind of think of saturation as the distance from gray of that particular color. So at 0%, it's fully gray. At 100%, it's fully that color. In the next example, we're going to cover the third value of HSL, hue, saturation, lightness. We're going to cover the lightness property. Now, as you can see in example 3 that I have here, I've done a very similar thing where instead of looking at the saturation, now we're looking at how lightness affects an HSL value. So we're going from 0 lightness to 100 lightness. And once again, we're doing that with CSS custom properties. And now we're changing the third value of our HSL color. Now, 0 in this case is going to be fully black. 50% is going to be the color without any black or white mixed in. And then at 100% lightness, it's going to be fully white. So you're going from black to the color at 50% and then to white at 100%. So as you think about HSL, the H is the hue, the saturation is the distance from gray, and the lightness is going to be the distance between white and black. So a fully vibrant color is going to have a hue with a saturation of 100% and a lightness of 50%. That's how we write these values. Now, the reason that I love HSL so much is that we can visually tell what a specific color is. And in fact, we're going to play a little game where we try and name a specific color just by looking at the HSL value. We can probably tell what these colors are, or at least about what they're going to look like, just by looking at the value, which is very hard to do with RGB and hex values. So what I'm going to do is we're going to look at each of these colors and we're going to try and figure out what they are, and then I'm going to uncomment the code, and VS Code will tell us what that color looks like. So for the first one, I'm going to look at this one. So it has HSL hue of 0. So we know that is red because the 0 is the top degree. We know that's red. A 50% saturation. So it's going to be in between red and gray. So it's going to have some gray in it. And if it's 50% lightness, means it's exactly in between black and white. So it doesn't have any black or white in it. So it's kind of like a reddish grayish color. So let's uncomment this and let's look at the preview and see if we're right. And indeed, we are. So that one was easy enough. Let's look at another example. In this one, we are once again, our hue value is 0. So we know it's back up on red. We have a 0% saturation. So that's going to be, well, fully gray in that case. And we're also mixing a little bit with black because we're under 50%. So it's going to be a blackish gray. Let's see if we're correct. And indeed we are. This is a blackish gray. On the third example, HSL, the hue is 180, so it's going to be on the bottom. So it's going to be in between green and blue. So it's probably going to be like a bluish green, light blue. The saturation is 100%, so we know it's a fully vibrant color. And the lightness is 50%, so we know it doesn't include any white or black. So if we uncomment that, we get that blue-green color right there. So this is why I love this color notation. One little trick, if you watch this video this long, that I'm going to show you on how to convert your hex values or your RGB values into HSL values within VS Code. This works for every single VS Code editor, no plugin required. Let me show you this one trick that's going to allow you to convert your colors if you're as into this color notation as I am. If you look at the color box that's included here and you actually click on it, you're going to see that it brings up the HSL value and it actually lets you change the color here. But in this case, we're not interested in that. We're only interested in changing the notation from this to hex to RGB and back to HSL. So if you click up on this color value here, you can see it actually changes back to RBG, over to hex, and then back to HSL. So if you have a hex value, let's try one. Let's do 000. And then let's go ahead and click on this and change this over to HSL. One click gets us over to HSL. The same thing is true of RGB. So let's say we have an RGB value of 25500. And let's go ahead and let VS Code handle that for a second. And then we'll click on it and we can click over into our HSL value. So that's a great way to convert your colors. If you like this color notation, you can certainly convert that over to HSL very easily. I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure and give it a thumbs up and a like. And if you want more videos that break down HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and beyond concepts, be sure to subscribe to this channel and I'll be sure to bring you more videos just like this one. I'll see you in the next video.